This is Emmitt Hamelin's Man Cave. Sports talk with the legendary Emmitt Hamelin.
Good afternoon. My name is Emmitt Hamelin, and welcome to the second episode of the Man Cave. Joining us today is Harley Delaronde and Paul Rice, the KFFL Champion. Today we're going to talk about the NHL, the NFL, NFL free agency, and we're going to do some picks for the UFC. So let's get right to it. We're going to start off with who's hot and who's not in the NHL. I just seen that Anaheim has overtaken Chicago as the number one team in TSN's power rankings. What do you guys think?
Well, I haven't really watched a lot of the Western teams so far this year. It gets a little old in my old age, I like to get to bed earlier, so it's sort of a little difficult. I catch a period or two of them, But yeah, they've really actually been quite surprising, given the fact that the guys who are early in the year that were really doing well was some of the elder statesmen, such as Mr. Koivu and Teemu Selanne. Those guys just keep going and going and going, like the Energizer Bunny type thing. But I think that they were being very consistent throughout. I think playing really well as a team. Obviously, the coach has them going really well. But I still like Chicago, to be quite honest with you. I think in the big picture, it was bound for them to have a little bit of a letdown. I mean, 2 games. And then all of a sudden they dropped down. I'm not sure if I agree with TSN and their power ranking on that, but certainly Anaheim's in the mix. If we're talking the top 3 or 4 teams, you have to put them in there, and they belong up near the top.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I don't usually pay a lot of attention to the power rankings from you. I'm a firm believer in whoever's hot during the playoffs is going to be the team that's going to go the furthest. But what I like a lot about Anaheim, and you touched on it a little bit, Harley, was the coaching. And what the coach has done there is he's basically created an competition. Nobody's spots were handed to them. Every player had to go and earn his spot. And you look at how he's dispersing Perry, Getzlaf, and Ryan. I don't think they've played together for a whole game the entire year. He basically keeps putting guys like Kyle Palmieri, Matt Bolesky. Where did these guys even come from? They sign all sorts of mid-level guys. They pair them with their superstars. Their goaltending's a pure competition. Hiller and Fostov, they're probably one of the best goaltending duos in the league. They would be the best if it wasn't for Chicago's Crawford and Emery. So I like what the coach is doing. It reminds me a lot of when they won the Stanley Cup. The last time they won the Stanley Cup, it was a lot of blue-collar hockey when they got to the playoffs. It was physical hockey, and that's how you win in the playoffs, is good goaltending, physical hockey, and timely offense. So it looks like he paid a lot of attention to how they won the Stanley Cup last time, and he tried to recreate that this year here in Anaheim. So.
Well, I think exactly what you said is really important, though, is the in general, not necessarily in that specific case, Anaheim, but the good coaches and the teams that are going to do well are generally, if you look at it consistently the last number of years, a coach that can find the kind of guys who are willing to play a certain role for him and sticking in that role, knowing what their role is, knowing that he needs a certain type of player on this line. He needs someone to open the ice for the other guys, let's say, for example, or play a certain style, one stay-home defenseman more, one guy that's going to pinch a little bit more, take some chances. Guys that know I'm not here to do this or that, and really accept that role and play as a team and work with each other and work for each other, I guess, in a sense. So that's what's going on, and those are the teams right now. And I think, again, as I said, 2 weeks ago, the key in this year is that coaching. The coaching becomes even more important throughout the season. It's going to, again, come playoff time, it's going to be a lot of things, as you said. Who's getting the hot goaltending? Who's got more nicks and bruises and bumps? Definitely. We don't know that. We that's the thing. You don't always know. Some guy's playing and he's in the playoffs, and who's really banged up and is just out there and he's only playing 80%, and who's going closer to 100%, if there's anyone at all going at that point of the season. So this is key, knowing your players, knowing who needs a little bit of a rest, a little bit more time, as you said, knowing who he needs a little motivating, maybe a little less time, and pull them aside and say, hey, you're forgetting what your role is, and you're forgetting what got you here, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the kinds of things. Now, in talking about some of the other hot teams, maybe we could talk about one of the teams I do have to talk about, and we always joke about I'm not a Canadiens fan, but I have to give them credit. I keep expecting something to explode, something to all of a sudden we're at a 5-game losing streak, but they're just not doing it. And you have to give credit to their management and their entire management from Molson down, really from Molson down to they made a whole big change. And of course Therrien, but also Bergevin getting the right players. There's a few guys that have really impressed me, and I keep saying, something's going to happen, but they keep playing very, very well, and that they're a good example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, they had quite a turnaround. I mean, from one year to the next. If you think about where this team was at the end of last year, this team had a lame duck coach. It was full of players that didn't look like they were interested in playing hockey. The general manager was making boneheaded moves left and right. So what the new management did, the new ownership did, they came up, they tore it down top to bottom, rebuilt the whole thing. They put in guys who actually know what they're doing. Bergevin got to where he is because he's a quality scout. Michel Therrien has coached quality teams before, and their goal at the beginning of the year, I remember seeing this on the 24 Canadians, the show they have on TSN. Right. He came out and said, every year there's 5 or 6 surprise teams, so our goal this year is to be one of those surprise teams. And that turnover, it goes down to the roster. They signed Proust, they signed Armstrong, they brought in the 2 rookies right away. They just the guys that didn't want to play, they just didn't bother putting them out on the ice. If you don't want to play, if you don't want to try hard, then you're not going to get ice time for the Montreal Canadiens this year.
Perfect. A real good example. I was watching a game last night of a guy who's getting a lot of ice time and he's thriving, and I was really amazed at how well Lars Eller's been playing. I thought this guy just all of a sudden he just transformed from last year, and he was a really dangerous player, and making the defense just worry about him so much. He's always in the mix, and he's an example of how a lot of the players under Therrien and this whole system seem to have matured up their game, and they're all of them. It's not 1 or 2, but he's a great example. But they are, and then have gone a little bit. He's brought in the right kind of guys, and again, saying to it peers that you're saying, if you're going to play hard, if you're going to hustle, you're going to play the system I want, you're going to do what I want, you're going to get the ice time. And if you're not going to, then you're not going to be dressing or playing very much.
Lars Eller definitely looks like he's the next star for the Canadiens, and they've had quite a few. Moving on, well, actually, I want to add in Corey Perry just got suspended for four games, I believe. So, like you said, Paul, they haven't had Corey Perry, Bobby Ryan, or Getzlaf on the ice at the same time for too many games. Mm-hmm. But moving on now. NFL free agency started on Tuesday, I believe. The biggest signing for me is not Mike Wallace going to Miami. It's actually Wes Welker going to Denver. He's going to make that team just incredibly better. They already have Demaryius Thomas. They already have Eric Decker, and then to add Welker, as a slot guy, it's just how are you going to beat them? Who do you cover? Who are you going to double team? You can't double team anyone because Peyton's going to pick you apart. And they also have Jacob Tammy, and they're looking for another running back. I believe they're interested in Beanie Wells.
Oh. Denver doesn't need another running back. I mean, they're set. Look at the depth that they showed last year. Their starter went down. The next 2 backups came in. They didn't even miss a beat. And the key to that was Moreno having that 3-down ability, pass protecting for Peyton Manning. But the Denver Broncos are only going to go as far as their defense takes them. I mean, Peyton Manning, it's a cliche thing to say, but Peyton, he probably has the best offense around him that he's ever had. He has the best slot receiver, that's for sure. Welker, I would say, is an upgrade over Brandon Stokely. And he turned Brandon Stokely into a Pro Bowler. So Welker was a great signing, but it's really going to come down to the defense, especially what they can do on the back end. They took, a calculated risk. They signed Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. The guy doesn't know how to tackle, but he can definitely cover receivers, and that's something they struggled with against Baltimore. They weren't able to cover receivers deep, and if you look at the last play of the game that put them into overtime, it was a 70-yard touchdown when they should have been playing prevent defense. I don't know if anybody remembers, but Jacoby Jones had 5 or 6 steps on the safety, safety. So they're going to have to rebuild that secondary. Champ Bailey was exposed as a step slower than everybody thought he was. So Cromartie brings in that speed. And the other thing they're going to have to do is stop the run. They signed Kelvin Vickerson. They brought in another defensive tackle. I think it was Bryant. So now they have 2 defensive tackles in the middle. And I think their best signing, probably their best signing, a little bit under the radar, it happened soon, is they signed Vasquez from San Diego. They stole a division rival's best offensive guard and put him in front of Peyton Manning. So the Broncos are in Lombardi or bust mode for sure. Definitely in Lombardi or bust mode for sure. And they made a lot of key signings right away. I definitely like them in the Western Conference. In the American League. If you're talking about the National Football Conference, the NFC teams, they only made one free agency splash. That was signing Cliff Averill. I'm talking about Seattle Seahawks. Getting Percy Harvin on that team, especially for the price that they paid, it seems like a lot, but Percy Harvin is a guy, he adds quality in the return game. He's a great returner. They already had Washington, but they're looking to dump him already. He can take maybe 50 handoffs a game. You put him in a motion offense with Russell Wilson, and for me, he's a number 1 receiver. He's not big, but he's fast and he's shifty, and getting that type of player onto your team, especially considering your offensive coordinator used to coach this guy, I mean, getting Percy Harvin onto your team for just a first-round pick, essentially, that's a steal for Seattle in that division. So I like them as the early favorite in the division. And if Russell Wilson continues to develop the way he's developed, I think they'll go all the way to the Super Bowl. I don't know if there's another team that can slow down that offense now that they've added Percy Harvin. So.
Well, I think you make some very good points there, Paul, about Denver, and I agree. They're obviously one of, if not the favorite right now, early. As far as getting to the Super Bowl from the AFC, they'd have to be one of the two. If not, I can't see who else might be ahead of them. But I agree with you. Defensively, I mean, if I'm a coordinator right now on any team that has Denver on my schedule, I'm going to be pounding the ball between the tackles as much as possible, play action, and that's it. And they'll bite on it and pop it over their heads. Because, yeah, he's going to move the ball. With or without Welker, they were going to have a good offense anyway. Now the question is just you don't have enough balls for all those guys, you know. You can only throw one at a time. But the reality is, yeah, he's got more options. He can do, and to me, he is one of those quarterbacks. There are a small handful, and the idea, and that's what talking about. Don't get me started about Joe Flacco, but I mean Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and one or two others maybe. They're kind of quarterbacks that do influence and make the other guys, the other players, the receivers better than they actually are. Not that Wesley Welker's not a great receiver, but Tom Brady certainly helped him. If Wesley Welker goes to a team with a middling to decent NFL quarterback, Wesley Welker is not going to probably catch as many balls as he does in New England or coming up in probably with Denver, just because he knows he's smart enough to say, well, I think Wesley Welker now, maybe he, they were looking at, he dropped a few balls, maybe he's maybe on the end of his career now. He's not in the best. I don't know about that because he's got Peyton Manning. But
exactly.
But it's certainly going to help, and Denver is going to be a difficult team. But the whole idea of the free agency, though, I mean, everybody gets all wound up and who's getting what free agent and so on. And yes, depending in certain cases, a big free agent, the right setting, the right mix, all of these things are important. Sometimes, look at their stats and all that, and you say, well, this guy, that guy, and then you see him signed as, is he going to fit in with that team? Free agents, you don't know about motivation when they sign a lot of for big money and so on. I mean, I've seen some of the contracts that are signed on the, if you want to call it, middling kind of players. I'm a big Oakland Raider fan, as you know, and I've been a big Oakland Raider fan. Look, this guy's what's this?
I'm an Oakland Raider fan too. That's why.
But they let go. They signed two of their free agents. Now they were two of our better defensive players, not the best, but two of our better defensive players last year. That being Desmond Bryant and Philip Wheeler, and they gave them crazy contracts, in my opinion. Those are crazy contracts. They're good players. and they deserved raises from what they were making last year. But we're talking like $6 million or something in that ballpark area a year. When I would have said 3.5, for both of them, maybe 4.
But see, the Raiders of past years would have not let these guys walk. They would have paid the deal. They would have brought these guys back, and everybody would have been, oh my God, surprised! They're not as good as we thought they were. That was the old Raiders.
And that's what's going to happen in most cases. But I say, like Wesley Welker slotting in with Manning is probably going to work real well, and a few other cases. But 80% of these free agents are going to be, 80% of them will end up being, they're not as great as you said, as we expected them to be, because of whatever reason, and whether it be motivation, whether it be they're not the right fit, and that type of thing. And then they're left with these big contracts that they have to start restructuring in a year or two, these types of things, and then they're going to be let go. So if you look at the history of the free agent market, if you would, and the signing them and so on, sometimes I'm more of a find those guys that are up and coming, that have a little motivation, sign them to medium, reasonable, bring in guys to fit a piece here or there, and that's it. And then go from there. Build through the draft. I'm a big build through, and that's why I'm, in terms of my favorite team, the Oakland Raiders. I'm glad what they're doing. They're missing a second pick, but that's my hope. My hope right now is, I'll tell you what I hope. They've got the third pick. Let's trade down if possible. Who likely, now you've got Buffalo Bills. I believe they're 8th or 10th in that area. Buffalo Bills, perfect. They just let go of Ryan Fitzpatrick. They want Geno Smith. Why not, come third pick, probably Geno Smith is there, to be sure, trade down. Trade down, actually trade up if you would, and the Raiders trade down, get an extra pick, fill in that get their first pick and another first or second or whatever. Get more bodies. Teams like that are looking for more. You're going to get quality in the first round, second round if you do your job. If you got good people there like Reggie McKenzie or whoever on the different teams, good evaluators of talent, and they looking at guys not just talent though. Evaluators of character. And character is often, as I said, when we were talking about the combine last week, that's important, all of the numbers, and he does a 40 and 4.5. Obviously, you don't want the 4.5 corner to be running a 5. But the thing is, they knew pretty well where most of them are going to be, but they want that opportunity to interview them, to talk to them, to find out what kind of person. They talk to other people. What's this kid like in this situation? And is he football, loves to play football, and he's not just here like Jamarcus Russell.
That's I'm hoping Dallas signs Jamarcus Russell. He's going to turn us into a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, Dallas.
How about this? I was just thinking of this now. Why doesn't Oakland cut Palmer, get rid of Palmer, and use Pryor as their starter, and maybe sign Fitzpatrick or Matt Castle, and then trade down from 3 to 8 with Buffalo. So Buffalo's probably going to take Geno Smith, and you guys take Jarvis Jones. Someone like that.
The way that the Raiders draft is going to go, if it's anything, because McKenzie came from the Packers. Yeah. If it's anything like the way that the Packers draft is, every pick that comes up, if they're not able to trade down, they're going to take the best available player that fits their system, and they already have a formula of character, motivation, talent, and they just put all that together and they evaluate each player like that. They have their own board. They don't go by what the norm is. That's the way McKenzie does it, and he'll take the best available player. In terms of cutting Palmer, unfortunately, I agree with you. Statistically, he put up a great season last year, but if you watch the actual games, he was the predominant reason why we were losing. He put us in the hole early in the game, and then he would throw for 300 second half yards and a furious comeback attempt, but we'd still lose by 2 scores. That in a nutshell, Harley's nodding his head furiously because that's what happened every single game.
Well, there's a perfect example of the Myers kid, a tight end. And we're talking about the Raiders, but this sort of is what happens with a lot of teams. We don't have the time to really look in depth in-depth at every team and what really is going on there. But those who follow, like we're using the Raiders right now because we enjoy watching the Raiders. But that's a perfect example. Is the Myers kid? Everybody looks at. They look at the stats. Now I know some of you like the fantasy football. I'm not a stats guy myself. I'm a guy that has to watch the game and wants to see a Brandon Myers who has like I don't even remember 70 something catches or 50, whatever it was. But but you know what? He catch the ball. He could his yards after catch was probably half a yard, and for average yard, and so far he turns around. He wasn't. A lot of it was in garbage time. Absolutely. A lot of it was garbage time. So I wouldn't worry about things like that. So somebody goes, well, and the team knows that. So that's why the team doesn't say, well, we're not going to make a big push to sign the guy at any kind. If someone wants to go somewhere and they want to give him the money, fine. We're offering what we think he's worth. He's the guy that happened to be starting for us. Can't block worth hell. Well, actually he could, but he wasn't blocking well last year. But I thought he anyway, and. So these are the types of things a team knows, and if their people properly evaluate their players in their system and know that we're going to run this system and this guy is what we need. We need this kind of for our scheme on defense or the system. Like, you hear all this kind of stuff on power blocking, zone blocking, and, but bottom line, if they know that, this is what they're running, then they know the kind of players they want. They know who to let go and who's a character guy and so on. So you let go a certain guy, you say, bye-bye. If you want to stay for less, that's fine. We'll find somebody else. We'll find someone for cheaper, and we might find them in the draft too, and we're going to find some good kid who's going to, cost us, $700,000 or something like that, and then for 2-3 years, and then. And then we have our base team together. Then we find the free agent if we think we got a shot to do something. Then we find a free agent that'll make a difference here or there.
I agree with you. And a player that I think is going to make a difference for his team, not necessarily for himself. I don't think statistically he's going to perform as well as he has in the past. And that's Mike Wallace for Miami. He got the big contract that he wanted. He got out of Pittsburgh. He's going to get the looks that he wanted. But I don't know if that offense is going to be as good as any of the offenses he was ever in. But he definitely got a lot of guaranteed money. You look, the first year of the deal is $1 million guaranteed. Year 2, they guaranteed him $15 million to basically run a deep route half the time, a couple slants, a curl here and there. But he's just going to clear out the offense for everybody else underneath them. They don't have a lot of talent to begin with. Wallace is one of the more talented receivers that they have.
Hey, they have one of the best wide receivers in the league, Brian Hartline.
They actually got him. Hartline signed for less, I think, to stay with Miami than what he would have gotten in the open market. So it looks like Miami's trying to build an offense there. I heard them linked to a couple of other tight ends. They're trying to give some weapons to their young quarterback, Tannehill, who I think has a half-decent future in the NFL. He showed some signs here and there. I just don't know if Miami's going about it the right way. They're signing a lot of guys, committing that money to Wallace. For me, he seems like a guy that once he gets paid, the effort level just drops through the floor. Like, there's going to be no effort on his part now that he knows he's going to make that guaranteed money, in my opinion. So.
Any chance the Ravens do anything next year of significance, given the defense and what has happened, the number of guys they've lost, obviously by Ray Lewis, their emotional leader or whatever, and Darnell Ellerby, who was essentially his backup, and also a couple of other players, and they're going to read probably Pollard. So I think that's going to be very difficult. But again, you play a style, you bring in your kind of players. I don't think that the Ravens defense is going to be lousy. I think it's just because I don't think it will be. I think because when some of the players were out, they were able to adjust because they have a system. They're going to bring players in. They're going to draft us. I think they're going to probably draft the Minter kid from LSU to fill in the middle. And they're going to be young. They're going to be wanting to prove themselves. And I don't think they're going to be as good as they were. But I don't think they're going to be a terrible defense. People will just say, they lost these 3 or 4 guys. They're going to be terrible. They're going to be solid because it's part of their of who they are. They play this certain kind of defense and they take pride in it. And I think the coaching staff and the whole management is going to ensure that happens.
I agree with you to a point, but I think the Ravens won. They won't even make the playoffs. They won't even be competing for the playoffs in the last month of the season. And I back the Ravens from. I don't like Joe Flacco, but I like the approach that he took to his own personal situation. I like what he did, but I don't like him as a player. I was backing them all through the Super Bowl. I thought they'd win the Super Bowl. Now that they've gutted their defense, they are going to replace it through the draft. They're going to have some real quality guys there, but I think by the last month of the season, they won't even be competing for a playoff spot.
Well, I was essentially saying that they wouldn't be terrible in the sense of being a 4-win, 12-loss kind of team. I think they're looking at 8-8, 9-7 type team, but I think they're going to need a year or two to bring that defense up close to what they want. But they won't be a terrible defense. They're going to be a middle of the road defense. I'd say in the middle of statistically probably and so on. Well, I think that what I was referring to earlier was about Joe Flacco too. You had mentioned, and I agree with you. I think that they overpaid. Now, of course, I mean, from a lot of different angles. I mean, here you are, you won a Super Bowl with this quarterback. So they couldn't really afford to say we're not paying you, and then he walks away. That wouldn't look very good to their fans. No. The fans are looking at that, but the reality is, he, in my mind, top 10 quarterback at best.
He had the season of his life.
Yeah, I think so. And I think given the things fell in place, this is what happens. Part of a management and the coaching staff looks at, we've got the team, we got a small window here. Most of the teams, and if this guy comes through, and if this happens, and if we give him the piece here, they go for it. And they happen to do it, but now they happen to have been successful and things fell together. A couple of big plays. They could have easily lost earlier and not made it so far and even to the Super Bowl. But these things fell in place, and then all of a sudden, Joe Flacco's the best thing since sliced bread. And I don't think it's as healthy for you, sliced bread. White bread, and I think that he wasn't the whole wheat. So he wasn't whole wheat. But really, these can be some interesting. The free agent is an interesting time, and it's part of what the NFL does so well. They do it better than anyone else. They promote themselves. They keep themselves in the news year-round. Their coverage, their NFL network, how they do it. They're just the best-run league that there is. And so now the free agents is now what we're talking about. The draft is coming in, and I mean you've got that and so on. And next thing you know, mini camp here and this and that, and the coverage is just incredible. And it makes it interesting for the fans, the speculation, as we're doing right
now. You hit it right there, the speculation.
Yeah.
The fan speculation is what's fueling this whole time between when the Super Bowl ends and when preseason football starts. We love to speculate. That's exactly what we're doing now, and the NFL just feeds that. They just feed it, and the fans want it. So I agree with you, definitely. Yeah.
Any chance that the Ravens give Ray Lewis a call? Give him a call and tell him to come back for a price, maybe $10 million for a year, because he said he hasn't cleaned out his locker yet. And he kind of looks like he wants to come back. I mean, wouldn't you, after winning that Super Bowl, wouldn't you want to come back?
Oh, maybe he would, but why would they? This is what I look at, is other than him almost being more of a coach and the the leader, this and that. But as far as his play, it's time to move on now. He like in terms of getting a replacement, maybe for him to come, be there and be the, if you want to call it the mentor for someone like Kevin Minter, whoever they do finally decide to bring in as a middle linebacker, to show him what a leader, how a leader would. But he's probably done that with a lot of the other players already. But I think he's just, he's feeling like maybe I want to. He could possibly, but I don't think it's a good question of money anymore. I'm sure he's got all the money he wants. It's not that. He's a guy that people talk about. He's a football player, and he likes to play football, and that's what you want. You get guys that they run fast in the in the 40, and they have all the measurables, etc. But they're not football players. They don't have that instinct. He had that instinct. He has that desire, the leadership qualities, yes. But I think that's why it's hard for him to completely pull away. But he doesn't. It's not going to be a question of money. They might say, come in, spend some time, you'll be a part. But I don't think he wants to be a part-time player.
No, I don't think he wants to be a part-time player. And I think even they could offer him as much. if ignoring the salary cap, if they offered him $20-30 million for one season, I'm pretty sure he would still say no. And the reason I say that is, who wants to come back after winning a Super Bowl and then come back and play a full season and see? I mean, let's be honest here. Before he got hurt and before the Ravens made the playoffs, he looked like a shell of himself. He was not the Ray Lewis of old. He was getting run over by average running backs. He was getting run past by average running backs. In coverage, he's pretty terrible in coverage, a place where I think he leads all middle linebackers in history in interceptions. He used to be great in coverage, but tight ends were abusing him. And then he played real emotional football through the playoffs to carry that team to the Super Bowl. So I don't think he wants to come back and get exposed again for an entire NFL season. And if you think of Ray Lewis, the football player, he takes that football player attitude and he applies it to his whole life. The character and the resolve that he shows on the football field, he applies it to other areas of his life, and I think he's prepared to move on. I mean, I'm not Ray Lewis, but I think he's prepared to move on and impact other areas of his life. So that's my opinion.
Oh yeah, I agree. Ray Lewis coming off a Super Bowl is he doesn't want to go back and be on an 8-8 team. And yes, he was a shell of his 3 or 4 years ago self, but his experience and knowing their defense, knowing the system, that he used that to make up for that extra step or so, that he was a little slower or whatever, or not as agile, mobile, and but always hostile.
He was. I still remember in the Denver playoff game, Moreno took an I-form run up the middle, and Ray Lewis just planted him in the first quarter, and that looked like vintage Ray Lewis. And when that hit happened, I knew the Broncos were in trouble in that game. I mean, he sets the tone for them, but he's not going to come back. I think his career is done. He went out on top, and he's by far one of the greatest players ever in the NFL.
I think next year the team to be aware of and very dangerous, and maybe my early favorite for Super Bowl is Seattle Seahawks. I think that they, like you said earlier, Averill they added, and they just that's probably their biggest weakness, and so I think this team is going to be. Now the only question is going to be Russell Wilson. Does he have the sophomore slump? I don't know about the sophomore slump kind of thing. Everybody seems to part of it might be everybody for a little while they figure it out. Their second or third time around, look at him a little closer in film. So yeah, they do. But come the end of the season, he's a veteran at that point. So he's showing he's one of the players, though. I think the interesting thing is the Kaepernicks, the Russell Wilson, the mobile kind of quarterback, that whole different kind of offense and approach to things. That's how far is that going to go? Is that going to be really the new trend, or is everybody going to say, whoa, people go with this trends type of thing and think that everybody just goes 100%. No, I think people take it and they'll look at, we want a mobile quarterback, that's where it's going, but they put their own little slant. The offensive coordinator or whoever, the head coach or whatever, looks and says, we're going to take elements of that and we're going to fit it to the kind of players we have, and we're going to see, and maybe we like this, it's working, but we're not going to take it complete. So it's going to be interesting, though, how far some of the teams decide to go in that direction. Teams that already haven't gone in that direction. Are there going to be more teams that, like you mentioned, again, we go back to Oakland Raiders. Did they get rid of Carson Palmer? I don't think they do. I think they keep him this year. They made enough. They get rid of him next year, but they don't get rid of him this year. But they bring in another guy. They were talking about this one. I don't like. They're bringing in Vince Young. Vince Young. But I think the reason they might want to do that is because the idea of the mobile kind of quarterback again, and Pryor, and I think that they're looking, can Pryor do those types of things that a Colin Kaepernick, then a Russell Wilson, and we'll see, So, but they have Carson Palmer there. They're going to try someone like Terrell Pryor a little bit more, see if it works. Put more, I guess, a few more things in of that style of offense, and see how it goes, and then make a decision partway through or after the year.
I could definitely see Carson Palmer being cut, the signing of Vince Young and Terrell Pryor as the two quarterbacks in Oakland. As scary as it may sound as an Oakland Raiders fan, I could see them doing that, running the same sort of read option scheme with McFadden in the backfield. It's a little bit dangerous for the defense to try to cover, but the Oakland Raiders have a history. I know they have a new GM. I know they have a new methodology to what they're doing, but they have a history of taking things that are effective and breaking them. So in this case, if they were to try run that read option with Pryor and McFadden in the backfield, I'm not really sure that, like you said, I don't think if they tried to copy it, what they did with Wilson and Kaepernick, it wouldn't work because Terrell Pryor doesn't have the aptitude that Russell Wilson and Colin Kaepernick have. Those guys are quarterbacks playing quarterback that are athletic. Terrell Pryor is an athlete trying to play quarterback. That, for me, is the difference.
He did well, though, in college with Ohio State. When I saw him, again, highlights mostly. I wasn't following the team, but he has some, there's maybe not as much accuracy, but more speed. Just as much and more mobility. But getting on to some other areas, who would you say, again, we've mentioned a couple of the teams, who would you say are some of the early Super Bowl, right now with free agency having started, who are some of the favorites? We've mentioned a few. I don't know. I feel that right now we're looking at Denver and Seattle in my mind. But a lot of people still say, San Francisco, of course. That's going to be quite the battle in the NFC West next year. It's turning into one of, if not the best conference, when 3 years ago it was the worst conference. Division. Yeah.
It could be the new power division. I mean, just with those two teams. But I think the NFC Conference Championship, it'll be San Fran versus Seattle, and in the AFC, Denver versus. Does it really matter? Denver's probably going to win it. I think Denver could win the Super Bowl. But Denver versus San Fran or Seattle, I don't see anyone in the AFC really challenging Denver. Maybe New England, but their defense is.
Well, Houston.
Funny. Houston, maybe. I don't think Schaub is. I don't think Schaub is a Super Bowl quarterback. I don't think he can win it.
But then again, how many people thought Seattle last year at this time was going to be that good a team, and how many anticipated Russell Wilson coming in and doing that? So, like what you're saying is, if one or two, there's a lot of ifs, but which teams that if they pick up that one or two successful additions, if you would call it, impact from. And a few things pan out, like free agency, are right on the cusp of making that extra step.
I got one for you, and it does require maybe 1, 2, 5 steps. But I got a team for you, and that's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, when they were at home in Tampa Bay, had the number one defense in the NFL. It's when they went out on the road, they would normally get blown out on the road. But at home, they had the number one defense in the NFL, the number one run-stuffing defense. Their pass defense got exposed a little bit, but they just signed Deshaun Goldston. They stole a safety from a conference rival, and Deshaun Goldston's that center fielder. They have Mark Barron. They just drafted him last year, a top 10 pick. He's your big, hard-hitting safety in that cover 2 defense. I like them a little bit. I don't think New Orleans is going to be as good as they have been in the past. Atlanta's a team that I think they played well above their head last year to get as far as they did. And if you're looking for that surprise team that's going to contend, I think Tampa Bay is going to be one of those teams that contends this year. They have a really talented offensive line as well. Their quarterback's young. He's big. He's mobile. And they also have Vincent Jackson, Mike Williams at receiver. I think they have enough pieces there. If they have a good draft, they sign some value free agents. They don't overspend on free agents, and they get some value there. I think Tampa Bay could be a sleeper team for the playoffs, maybe not necessarily the Super Bowl right now.
I see that. And it's funny, when you see these. Why does a team? How is it that a team is able to play that well at home on defense and then go on the road? And you have to, the management, the staff, they have to look at these types of things and examine what are we doing wrong. I mean, what is it that a team? And we're not just talking. We can understand the aspect of crossing going from east to west coast type thing. It has an impact at time. You know that, and how you deal with that. Some teams do better than others. Examining who's doing a good job and what is it that they're doing that makes a difference. But I do not understand how that happens, because once the first player, once you get into the game, having experience in playing in that, you're not thinking about, well, we're at home or we're away. I can understand the crowd element of it, especially for the offenses primarily though. But and that's a big part of it, the crowd and the influence of the crowd in terms of being able to hear signals and so on. That is probably for me the biggest thing, along with the fact that if you're playing on a natural grass surface and those are real concrete things to me that have an impact, but and traveling, as I said, from one coast to the other. But teams these are pros. They should be able to go an away game, and they should be able to perform near to their abilities, whether it's at home or away.
All right. I think we've talked about the NFL quite a bit actually in this second episode. We kind of have to move on. So UFC Saturday, GSP versus Diaz. We're going to do our picks actually right now. The co-main event is Carlos Condit versus Johnny Hendricks. What do you think, Harley? How do you see it playing out?
Well, Hendricks is very dangerous. He's got that, he showed in his last fight. He's got he's got the power to put the man down and put him out in one punch. So Hendricks is very dangerous, but Condit, he's smart. He reminds me in some ways about, going in there, and he knows that he probably can't stand with Hendricks, and he's going to be successful. So he's a smart guy. He's going to work the, trying to pick his spots, if you would. And but Hendricks is an animal. He's a tough wrestler. He's got it's pretty hard. I have to go with Hendricks. As much as I think Condit is going to keep it, it's probably not going to be a first round knockout because he's going to be very cautious, and Condit's going to be try to make it go longer and hope that maybe he has a little bit more gas than Hendricks, and that might be the only thing. But I'm going with Hendricks in a KO or a TKO on that one.
I have to go with Condit by decision. But is that risk where Hendricks does have the power? He can knock you out at any moment. I mean, it's all his power. I think. I mean, he's a great wrestler, but I think most of him being dangerous is the knockout power, not the wrestling. I think Condit can defend it, but I see this going to a decision and Condit winning. The next fight,
I mean, the pick that I have to agree with Harley. I think it is going to be Hendricks, and it is going to be a knockout. I don't think it's going to go to a decision on this. I think the ability that he has to end the fight pretty much at any time is going to show itself this weekend. That's pretty much so. I think we've been agreeing on a lot here.
Right, yeah. Well, great minds think alike. And great minds as we are.
But, the next fight, GSP versus Diaz. I mean, we briefly talked about it last week, and I mean, we all agreed on GSP. Well, me, Harley, and Joe. We didn't get Paul's perspective.
I don't know if I can add much to what you guys said, but I mean, it is going to be a tough fight. I know Diaz is going to give GSP a little bit of trouble down low, maybe take him down a few times, especially with his feet. But if you're looking at GSP to win the match, I don't know if you guys said in a knockout, or if it was going to be a hard-fought decision. I like GSP to win, but it's going to be one of those like grinded out, tough fights. You know how he does, right? It's going to be a tough one, but he's going to do enough to get the judge's decision in the end. So I'm going to go with GSP there as well.
This one's a tricky one. I think GSP will come out ahead, but I think Condit is quite a very good boxer. He wants to keep it standing up, but if it goes down, he's also very good in his jiu-jitsu. And so GSP's got to be careful, but I think in the end, I think GSP's going to take him down and pound on him, but very, very methodically, just to make sure that he doesn't get submitted. So I don't think it's going to be a TKO. It's going to be more of a might go long distance, but I think GSP will pretty much dominate him, take him down at will. And as you said, but then he just has to be careful. And I think he's smart enough, and he works very methodically, doesn't rush things, and doesn't put himself in a position to get submitted by Condit. I think he's just going to pound him. It may end up stopping it at some point, but I think it will be a TKO decision, and it'll go 5 rounds, and there'll be a lot of blood.
Yeah,
Mostly Condit. Mostly Diaz's.
Yeah, I really hope George Pauls Diaz. I really.
But it's really but see, you wonder if that's his. I believe it's his character, but sometimes is he just helping to saying this is the best way to get this fight? He's starting to say, well, this is Diaz. This is part of what everybody hates me, and if that's what makes me, besides my ability too, makes me somewhat popular in my unpopularity. So people are going to say, I want to fight him. I want to beat on him. They're going to watch it, and it's because you want to see him get beat. And he recognizes that, and he plays that role. There's a guy, he's training. He's a triathlon athlete. He's done triathlons. So, he's in shape. He knows what he can do. He's talented, but he also knows that, and he's playing the game. Oh, well, nobody pays attention to me. Nobody pays attention to me. Then he doesn't go to the whatever it was. They had a little. They had to have something. I think yesterday over at the Desjardins. I think it was downtown, and Complex Desjardins. And they were supposed to have a little workout. Didn't show. It's the only one that didn't show. So,
if all it was two guys got into the octagon and they fought, it wouldn't be as popular as it is. If you hit it on the head, you face it up. It's a little bit of marketing. At the same time, maybe it's a little bit of trying to mess with the psyche of the fighter. Oh, damn, that guy's pissing me off. I want to really hit him hard, So it takes the other guy off his game a little bit. So I'd have to agree. It seems like he's doing it on purpose. I wouldn't put it past him.
But I think that's part of the whole thing. When we were talking about the NFL knows how to market. Knows how to market their sport, their game. I love the sport myself, but there's a lot of people that it's perfect for. They get into it because of a lot of other, the whole setup. Let's face it, the betting and so on, and the pools and so on. It just adds to the interest. Well, I think to a certain degree, that's part. This sport is UFC. That is saying marketing is such a huge thing with us. We have to play that game, although it's real when they step in there. There's no doubt. It's not like pro wrestling, but we can do some of that pro wrestling kind of style of marketing, and do that and pump the whole thing up, and it benefits everyone. It benefits the company. It benefits the fans get all charged up, and it benefits obviously the fighters who are going to get higher paydays. So this is what's interesting is the whole thing. And then now, I look forward after this is what does he do next? Does he fight possibly Hendricks, or assuming GSP wins? If Hendricks wins, does he fight the winner of that, or does there talk again about fighting who, Mr. Silva? So that would be also the interest. But we'll wait till that comes up, and we're jumping ahead of ourselves.
You said something about pro wrestling, that it's not real. I didn't know that, actually.
All right, we'll have to have a discussion with you after. Yeah.
Oh, WWE is fake?
Yeah.
I am so mad right now.
Some good athletes there, though.
Oh, yeah, great athletes.
Yeah.
Great athletes.
Yeah.
I just want to get into next week. We will be having another guest on. Well, hopefully we'll have Harley, myself, if Paul is interested.
We'll see what's on.
But we're looking to have a town athlete, an athlete from town. He plays for a Condor, so I don't want to spoil it for you. But he's agreed. We'll be talking some golf. Some NHL.
Talking golf, I'll be here.
All right, good. There we go. We got Paul. And also, we're going to recap the UFC. We'll recap UFC, and we're going to have a discussion about whose streak was the greatest of all time. In our opinion, who had the greatest streak of all time, whether it be the 72 Dolphins, maybe the Canadians of.
I believe it was 76, was it?
76, I believe. Yeah. They only lost 8 games.
8 games, yeah.
I think it was. I was gonna say the Patriots, but they happened to lose the Super Bowl. Boo-hoo. I loved it.
Raiders fans aren't allowed to like the Patriots either, so.
or also.
They made up the Tuck rule.
Oh my God, did that change to two franchises? Or we could also go with the 0-16 Dolphins. I mean, not the Dolphins, the Lions.
Ooh.
Yeah, the 2008 Detroit Lions.
The greatest streak.
The greatest losing streak. or, could it be a recent one, as in 18 wins in a row for the Miami Heat, 23, 24 games with a point gained by the Chicago Blackhawks. So listen next week and you'll find out. If there's a certain discussion you want to hear, if there's a certain sport you want to hear, or if you're interested in being a guest, have a little discussion war with maybe Harley, Joe, Paul, you name it. We'll get them. We'll even get a little title. But yeah, for the second episode of the Man Cave, I'm Emmitt Hamelin. For Harley Delaronde and Paul Rice, we'll see you next week.
This has been Emmitt Hamelin's Man Cave, starring the legendary Emmitt Hamelin. Follow Emmitt on Twitter at TheEmmitt34 or on Facebook. This has been a production of Emmitt's Legendary Sports Nation.